Okay, many of you have probably noticed a bit of a difference in the gear that I have on. I've got on some new headphones. I'm going to talk to you exactly why I've made the switch, and the person that I have on the show here with me today is partly responsible, mostly responsible for that major switch in my life. So, welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk. All right, so I just had the most amazing conversation with Dan from DefenderShield, and we were so jazzed and excited about all the things that we were talking about, and about some of the things we're going to be doing in the future when we're talking about it on the next show. I'm like, wait a minute, we've got to record again, because there was something you just brought up that I forgot to talk about, and so now it's going to live as a part of this episode. However, it's this piece that is the air tube, the actual tube part. I wanted to ask, is it plastic? Because, I try to keep plastics out of my life as best as possible and things like that. And Dan just kind of casually went over it just now. He's like, even though we're not recording, I'll tell you the way we were able to get the sound to sound so good. Dan, can you please tell everyone what's it about?
Yeah, it turns out we're chatting about the ear, and it's taking a year or so to develop it. And what we found was we went through plastics, different designs, acoustical chambers differently. And ultimately, we found the chamber that works, but it had to be in aluminum, not plastic. And that was the difference between what we do and high quality.
There it is, folks. So if you have been quietly wondering, why has Josh got these weird looking headphones that are called air tubes and things like that? Well, we're going to talk all about it. Dan's going to go very deep with me. We're going to go on some tangents, but ultimately we're having a blast. So until next time, enjoy the show.
Joshua, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about chatting with you today because I enjoy the area you live in, and I'm on the peripheral, and I'd love to chat and learn more about you, and maybe I can share stuff about me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to, I sort of led in alluding to the fact that there's something different in what I'm wearing. And of course, if people are watching this, they can see that this doesn't look like your standard headphone set, or, headphones, right? And you see the balls here, and you see the tubing here, and you see a little microphone and volume adjuster down here. And I swear I'm not doing this just to encourage people to come and watch the video, but I would say this is probably going to be one of those ones where you at least want to see some of what I'm talking about. And I'm wearing this essentially EMF protection, or no EMF headset, and they're called air tubes. I'd love to have you talk through why this is important, because let's face it, a lot of people have started to see this trend of celebrities and athletes starting to go back to the corded headphones. I want to talk about why that is, but I also want to talk about the difference between those that we're seeing versus those that most people are actually using day to day, including myself, until I made the switch. So let's dive into it.
Wonderful. I'm going to start off a little bit by telling you a tiny bit of background of me, because
Please.
it will relate to how we got here. I
Okay.
was in the Bell system as a Bell Labs and developing technologies and testing technologies to ensure the compatibility into these networks. And so I was very familiar with the electronic space, the electromagnetic space, the environment that is surrounding all these technologies around us today. And about 15, 20 years ago, my wife mentioned to my boys that you shouldn't have the laptop on your lap. She was a social worker. She didn't really know what it was, but I said, "No, wait a minute. I understand this stuff. The power levels that are being transmitted out of a laptop certainly aren't sufficient to damage the human body." And then she sort of walked away, and I started thinking about it. And one of the things that I didn't ever do is look into the scientific world to see if that was legitimately true. Well, it turned out back then, after about 3 or 4 hours, we already knew that the male sperm could be up to 25% immobile. I didn't know that. None of us knew that, in my opinion. And so how could I be in an industry that I didn't understand the impacts of that technology? Fast forward to today, what I've done is created products, and I'm trying to help people understand why there may be a reason to have protection around the technologies around us today because of potential damages to the human body. And
Absolutely.
that's how come you have earbuds that have an acoustical coupling between your ears and your speakers that are outside and beyond your pineal gland, the and all the other frontal lobe organ that is basically potentially influenced by the emissions from our technologies.
Mm. Okay, there's so many rabbit holes we can go down, and what I love about having you on so far is that, you seem to be very open to going down those rabbit holes. So for the viewer and the listener, if you're ready to take this ride, let's go. Where I would like to start, obviously, thank you for sharing the background because I do think it's very important and it's extremely interesting to me. And of course, we'll provide more detail in the show notes. What I would like to touch on is this thing that has become vilified, like the industry of 5G and EMF. When people hear that, you've got a big portion of people who are kind of like, yeah, this is crazy. The world is against us and blah, blah, blah. Right. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where it's like, oh, come on. Like, this is all nonsense. And then you've got people that are somewhere in between. And I want to at least touch on it because I think there's a lot of EMFs, right? And I know you can touch on this even deeper than I can, but let's distinguish the fact of completely doing away with EMFs because there's native and non-native EMFs we know about, and then I want to touch on like the prevalence of so much radiation in today's world, right? So let's uncover all of the mystery around what's happening with us.
That's a great idea. Um, so we've ha- if you go back 50 years ago, no, even back 20, 25 years ago, um, nobody walked around with cell phones. Nobody had laptops in their lap. Nobody had devices in their ears. It didn't exist. But back then, we know there was electromagnetic radiation. What is electromagnetic radiation? It's the literally the transmitting source that takes a cell phone connection and connects it to a cell tower. A signal that goes 5 miles, up to 5 miles. And then you have the wiring in your walls. That's different than the radio frequency connection I just mentioned. And it's about the alternating current in your walls that are emitting electromagnetic radiation. You concentrated on, so there's two types, and they fall into the non-ionizing space. And then you have the ionizing space, which is much faster, which is like X-rays. So everyone sort of thinks that X-rays are the only thing that can hurt you because it's ionized. Well, that's not true. We have thousands and thousands of studies that talk about non-ionizing radiation and its implications. So it's starting to become more and more concerning because of the evolution of technology approaching our human bodies. If you look at the standard that was created over 30 years ago for the radio signal that goes from your cell phone to your cell tower, the standard was created over 30 years ago. And what they did, Josh, they took like a whole bunch of 6-foot males in the armed forces, and they characterized what would happen when a signal from a cell phone would enter into a brain as one example of concern. And what they were worried about was the heat penetrating into the body. And so what they did is they said, let's make this cell phone not any stronger in power than 1.6 watts per kilogram. So 1.6 watts per kilogram enters into a male's head 1 to 2 inches, and it can heat it up by 2 degrees,
Oof.
as much as 2 degrees. Well, if you think about it, that standard was great for 6-foot males. But today we have women, children, teenagers. The brain itself, the barriers protecting the brain are very different for a 6-foot male and a 6-year-old child. In fact, 98% of the human body, the human race, is not represented in the standard. Most people are not 6-foot males. So
Right.
we have a little bit of an outdated standard.
You think?
And all the study work we know about, all of it, is around biological impacts. What is happening to the cell itself from an exposure, a stressor? Any stressor outside the human body can influence the human body. Well, it's a stressor and it's influencing the human body, and it's not necessarily just heat you worry about. And so that's why it's sort of important to know that we have a fairly good understanding for the standard as being not necessarily up to date. We also know for sure that the standard that was created 30 some odd years ago doesn't represent the impact potentially to the cell of a human body. And we certainly know that a whole lot of people are being exposed and should be based on that standard. And now, if you think of that, we can say we know a lot about the impacts of a cell phone, which is roughly 1 gigahertz. It's the speed of the signal is about 1 gigahertz.
Okay.
We know a lot about it because it's been around for now 10, 15, 20 years. And so when you go to 5G, a lot of the 5G signals are within the cell phone range that are in today. In fact, they go up to roughly 10 gigahertz. A router has a 6 gigahertz signal, for example.
Okay.
And so you have those technologies, and we sort of know a lot about it. And scientific evidence shows that there are harmful impacts. I'll just give you a quick example. A couple of years ago, 5 years ago, Yale did a study on the pineal gland. And it said if you're associated with a 2.4 gigahertz signal from a router, and you have fluoride present, and you have a certain male, a mutated cell, a hereditary mutated cell, you're 3 times more likely to get cancer of that pineal gland as a result of an RF exposure. And so there's countless studies that demonstrate what that exposure can actually do to the human body. Another quick message. If you use the phone a couple of hours a day on your phone, on your cell phone, and you're talking to your friends and neighbors, and you do it for 10 years, you're 3 times more likely to get frontal lobe cancer of the brain. So we have science that says it's a problem.
And excuse me for a second, but that particular study you mentioned or example you mentioned, is that with the cell phone at the ear,
Yeah,
Or is that yeah?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Well,
then
that's no
mhm,
protection, right? And that's the
yep,
point you're trying to
yep,
make,
yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
So then I like to try to put myself in the shoes of because I've done a lot of research in this area too. So I want to try to put myself in the or in the shoes of the person listening and following along
Okay.
because I imagine that some of the next questions are, well, okay, is it any better to have Bluetooth because the phone is farther away from your head?
Okay. Let's I love that question because Bluetooth is interesting because you have it in your ears when you're using earbuds. Okay. Bluetooth in general, the standard of 1.6 watts per kilogram, we now talked about, right?
Mhm.
A Bluetooth is 15 times smaller in the power level coming out of a Bluetooth. It's 0.1 watts. Okay. So it's not a lot of watts. It's much, maybe you could argue better than a 1.6 watt. But did you know there's some science that shows 0.1 watts can mutate a frontal lobe cell? And so do I think you should be using earbuds? No, because an RF signal, even though it's lower, there's some evidence that there may be an impact to the frontal lobe as a result, particularly if you're losing it for long, long periods of time.
Yes. Now that is one of the reasons why we're here today talking about this because for the first time in my life, now keep in mind, I'm like you, I like to dive into the research. I like to tinker around in this world of quote unquote biohacking and whatnot. Ultimately, I like to call it health optimization. I try my best to find the best ways to optimize my health and wellness, not only for myself, but for my community, right? So I realized I kind of took a look back into my history of cell phone usage and laptop usage all the way up until to modern day. And I realized that over the years, I've gotten increasingly more time spent under heavy amounts of EMFs and radiation, right? Now, I can do all the things that there are to try to mitigate it, but I know for a fact that we like unless we're going to live inside of a Faraday cage, we can't completely block EMFs and RF signals and things like that, right? And I don't think many people are even willing to do that because we also know there's some negative implications of being in a Faraday cage for long periods of time as well.
Hmm.
So that's back to that beneficial and non-beneficial or ionizing non-ionizing radiations. So then I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. I I went from having a cell phone, having it on my head, not very long. Like this is when cell phones first came out. Wasn't very long because one, I didn't have the minutes, right? Or two, the battery life and things like that. So you really only use it for emergencies. Then I heard the research about having it in your pocket or near your private parts,
Right.
that impact on the body, both male and female. And so, okay, now I started at that point, I started to put the phone farther away from me. Okay. Then headphones came out, like the wired headphones came out. Okay. I felt like that was fine and great. But then living in New York City, I saw that there was a whole message about, if you have the cord, people know what it is, so they steal it from you. Okay, so let's go with the wireless versions. And I went wireless, and I thought, wow, like you just called out earlier, I thought that because it was a lower wattage and things like that, that I thought it was better. And so what I started to do was go for the best audio because I'm an audio guy. I mean, I'm audio and visual guy, but I really love sound. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm gonna get the biggest, the best, whatever, most powerful, noise cancellation, all these different features. And then I started to realize that, like, wait a minute, like maybe I should go with the wireless, but it still had a cord that was connected to it. Okay. And I'm going somewhere with this because I know there's some research to talk about the differences in all those so people can make their own choice, right? Um, and then something told me not to get the AirPods. I've never had AirPods. I actually have a brand new pair that was gifted to me that I've never opened. Um, so something told me I knew that there was a difference between the wireless with a wire that connects versus the AirPods versus the wired. And then I found out about air tubes. Can you maybe go over all of those differences? I know I just spit out a lot, but can you go over those differences?
You did spit out a lot.
I can talk a lot.
So, actually, great introduction. When you use a cell phone to your head, that's likely the worst case of an emission that could potentially impact your frontal lobe. The soft tissue, by the way, it's soft tissue typically that RF goes after. That's why I say the frontal lobe. And so if you put it in your hand and put it on speakerphone, that's pretty good. That's like best because you can move it away from you. You can still hear, but of course, so everyone else can hear too, which you don't really want. So we have something you run a wire through. Well, when you run a wire to your ears, well, there's electrons are running through the wire, and it's creating electromagnetic radiation, and so there is less emissions than when you had it to your head, but there is still some emissions that went to your head. When you use stuff in your ears that connects to something else using the Bluetooth, oftentimes those devices connect to each other, and it's a Bluetooth signal through your head. So, like, I'll give you an example. My own brother, he's using his earbud when he's talking on the phone. I said, "What are you doing? That doesn't make any sense." And he says, "Well, I like it." And then, of course, he went to the doctor because his muscles on his throat were bothering him, really
Yep.
seriously bothering him, right? And I said, "I've told you, get it out of your ear because there potentially could be that emissions that are creating a problem." Josh, he took it out for 1 hour, and literally he saw the pain over the next several hours go away. And so, like, there was for him a direct correlation. I'm not going to say that's for you, but when you pull it away, that very small power level can influence the frontal lobe as well as surrounding tissue. One of the things you have with your your headset, it's not just your head you're worried about. You're worried about the pineal gland. You're worried about other parts of the body that have that emissions going up to your head. And so when you go to the acoustical coupling, like you're talking about here, we take this signal that's electrical, keep it away from the parts of the body that could be most susceptible, convert the energy from electrical to acoustical, and we bring it to your ear. So all you're listening to is sound. That's the best of all worlds, in my opinion. And
Well,
by the way,
I'm with you.
I love music, right? And so I wanted a pretty good sounding product, and you got to look for things that can do that. And I think in the case of the technologies we offer, you get that high quality signal.
Absolutely. Thank you for breaking all that down. One of the things that you did touch on, and I think is very important, is kind of the triage effect or the leveling of all of this. And obviously, the completely wireless ones are probably the worst because you're going from Bluetooth through the brain, through the ear canal in the brain to the other
Great.
one. The ones that have a wire are maybe a little less bad, but still bad, right?
Yeah,
Because
they're Bluetooth.
yes,
It's a
yes,
Bluetooth, right? That's how they're
yes.
doing it.
Exactly. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing that I think is very important from my perspective that I want people to truly understand, and I don't say this like just because I have Dan on the show. I literally searched as much as I could because I found out about air tubes back in like 2018, I think. 2018 is when I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And I'll be honest with you, I thought, wait a minute. How is that going to sound as good as my Beats by Dre headphones? It's not possible. I just literally thought it's not possible. And I also didn't want to have all this cord hanging off of me because that's when I had made that switch. I had the wired ones that were wireless, but you know what I mean. And so then I just kind of forgot all about it, and something came over me because I think I saw some TikToks and Instagram reels that were talking about this trend of people switching. And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can find those air tubes that I had been talking about before," because a client of mine did actually get some when I talked about it years ago. And I was talking to my client and I was like, "By the way, what did you think about those headphones with the air tubes?" And he was like, "Yeah, they weren't that bad, but they kind of became like annoying because it was like always swinging around and this and that." And I said, "Well, you might want to dig those back out because I'm going to start doing some more conversations about that." And here we are. And so I ended up I bought a pair, and I actually got a gift for Christmas. So I have 2 pairs, and which is interesting because you've got the regular headphone jack, you know, the 3 millimeter, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and then I have the version that is the USB-C that goes into my iPhone, right? And when I first put it on, I promise you, I was so shocked at the sound. I was so shocked at how good the sound was. And that's what made me go, I have to reach out to the company because I don't know how they've done it, but they've done it. So well done.
Josh, it took me over a year to get the acoustical chambers sufficient where they didn't deteriorate the sounds and passed as purely as possible the actual high fidelity tone that was being transmitted from the
Yeah,
acoustical speaker. It wasn't easy. Most of the stuff that's been on the market, I think, doesn't concentrate on the fidelity of the sound, but we did because, like
clearly.
you, I'm a critic of. I don't want to listen to good music with bad speakers, and that's why we did that. So thank you for that. I'm excited because I really worked hard on trying to make sure that we don't just protect you, we give you the quality as well.
You've really done it, and I promise you, I've anybody that's been around me over the last few weeks and months, basically I started I'm on a, what is it called? Like a streak, a resolution, if you will. I haven't used Bluetooth headphones since before the beginning of the year.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And at a point I had gotten up to about six hours a day with my headphones in because I listen to other podcasts.
Yeah.
I listen to audiobooks. I love music. I work out with my headphones. I mean, I was flooding myself,
Right.
and I had only been doing it, well, only, I'd say for about a year is when I had done that much for that amount of time with the non-wired actual wireless headphones. And that's when I started to notice that something was changing. My HRV was getting lower. So I noticed that my VO2 max was dropping. My sleep quality was strangely enough not the same. And then I made a few other changes. It wasn't just the headphones, but that was a good sort of leveling of the field, if you will, right? And now I've started to notice, wait a minute, a lot more clarity is coming back. My sleep is insanely good, and my HRV's improved, VO2 max is improved, and it's like I think now I don't even take my phone with me when I go outside to go for a run anymore.
Wow. Wow. It's Josh. What's exciting about what you told me, I was on a podcast of maybe 6 months ago or so, and there was a lady I was talking, really bright lady, and I was saying it's important to create a sanctuary in your bedroom. That's where your body recovers. Mitochondrial repair occurs. Everything is so important to get the best sleep you can. Having a cell phone on your side table nightstand is the worst thing you can do. And I explained it in an extreme way. You can be walking, but you have a brain pattern that you're sleeping, and vice versa, which has been the case in some um, clinics that we work with. And so I said, get your phones off the counter, put it outside your room. Don't have Wi-Fi on if you can. Certainly don't have it in your bedroom. Remove all the sources of emissions, and you'll sleep better. And she was saying, thank you so much for that interesting conversation with me. I really do appreciate it. Josh, she didn't believe a word I said. About
No.
about 2 weeks about 2 weeks later, she calls me up and she said, Dan, my husband and I are sleeping through the night. I said, because RF can interrupt your brain patterns. It is a fact. And she just didn't believe it. The power levels are too low. No, they're not. It doesn't take much to do that. And so from a conservative point of view, you don't want your cell phone near your bed. You don't want your laptop or your tablet sitting there transmitting Wi-Fi signals while you're trying to sleep. It really does disrupt the sleeping pattern. Sorry for the diversion, but I thought it was
Not
an
at all.
important message.
No, I think it's very important. I'm glad you brought it up. And like we agreed, like we can go down rabbit holes because at the end of the day, we're trying to truly help. And I think it's storytelling and sharing our own experiences and the different testimonies that are out there that should help someone to maybe, if we help one person to make the switch to have a similar story, bravo to us, right?
Right, right.
Um, what I would love to touch on now, since you brought that up, is so obviously what people are hearing is get all of the stuff out, right? But then there's people that are going to go, well, it's not possible. I'm not doing it. My wife's not blah. They obviously right now don't understand the implications and the value of doing so. So what are some ways that we could sort of mitigate and to try to start seeing some level of impact so that then you can make bigger changes? One example I'll give that I do is I like to listen to binaural frequencies at night. And there's this company that I'm doing some work with called Solodome. And Solo Tones, they have this app called Solo Tones. And it was interesting because now that I'm starting to use no Bluetooth headphones and I'm trying to reduce all the emissions, I thought, okay, well, how can I still benefit from using that, like the vibrations and the sounds to help me through all these different processes, but reduce my EMFs. So what I decided to do was get one of those Faraday pouches for my phone. I have a wired connection a a portable speaker, right? And then that portable speaker is far enough away, so the pouch, doesn't allow for anything to come through. The wire then goes to the speaker. Yes, there's a speaker that is a portable speaker that is wireless, but I put it far away, right? I also have I'm very big on grounding and earthing, so I have earthing sheets. So I try to do my best to make sure my body is prepared and more resilient. But I found that has made a big change just doing that,
Yeah.
right? I haven't stopped the Wi-Fi. I mean, I probably could. That could be the next step. But I want to make sure people are coming away thinking there are some steps to be made. Yeah.
Well, my house is wired with Ethernet. I try to eliminate all exposures relative to a Wi-Fi signal in the room by using Ethernet.
Perfect.
I still have Wi-Fi running during the day, but then I have a $10 timer that turns it off at 10 o'clock at night and turns it back on at 7 in the morning because I eliminate any RF within the room. And by the way, that RF router is in the laundry room. It's not in my living room. Simply by moving it away to the
Mhm.
least part populated part of the house, you actually reduce the exposure. It's all about trying to reduce the emissions in your room. In fact, people don't realize when you have a cell phone, you have a Wi-Fi transmitter, a cell phone transmitter, a Bluetooth transmitter, and a GPS transmitter. You've got 4 transmitters coming out of one device. Well, if one bee would sting you, you're probably going to be all right. But when you have 1,000 of those bees in that room, now it becomes questionable if you'll live if you all get stung, right? And that's
Yeah.
the point, right? Remove the bees in the room. And guess what? Every device you have in that living room or the room you're in is a bee or multiple bees. So moving it away, turning them off is simple stuff you can do. And you really reduce the exposures and tend to be more safe. It's a conservative approach, but Josh, when I started in this space, it was probably 10 or 15. I'm not worried about you getting frontal lobe cancer from a cell phone to your head. The statistics shows it's relatively low. But at the same time, the human body's been responding to RF signals. They call it electric hypersensitivity. Started about 15, 20 years ago. It was around 10, 15%. There's studies today that show it's up to 50%. So our bodies are reacting to this, and I'm getting headaches. I'm getting depression. I'm anxious. Maybe I have allergy-like symptoms. And do I have an allergy, or I'm too close to the RF from the router? And there's clear evidence that there is that linkage. So it's not always cancer I'm worried about, although cancer does play a role. In fact, there's some epidemiology studies that show a direct link. And we can talk about it later. But my point is, it's not always that you're going to die from a RF signal. That's not true, most likely. But you can be impaired, and up to 50% in some studies show you are impaired. Your vision may hurt, your eyes may hurt. I talked about the sanctuary before. When you're in the sanctuary bedroom and you're looking at a monitor or I don't know, a laptop or any device that has transmission of images, you are looking at a blue signal in the spectrum of color that's actually impacting your eye. And it's not just macular degeneration that you're talking about, but you're talking about the chromosome, cryptochrome protein. There's a protein in the back of the eye that's the little switch that is turned on when you're supposed to go to sleep. It turns on because there's no light. But when you're sitting looking at this device and the Bluetooth is hitting it, it's saying, stay off. No, it's still daylight out. It's not really daylight. So the process of creating the sleep pattern and the melatonin that's naturally occurring in the body is prevented from happening. All because you're looking at a screen and there's blue light coming and it's telling the body, don't sleep. That's why when you talk about sanctuaries, you talk about sanctuaries that take that away at least an hour before you want to sleep, because it's interfering with your body. And there is premature macular degeneration studies that show when you're looking at these images, there is the potential for degraded back end of the eye. And so you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to realize that there's people that are obviously much more sensitive to this. You mentioned it earlier, and then there's people who are much more resilient to this. At the end of the day, we just need to become more aware, and it's not about believing what Dan is saying, believing what Josh is saying, or what your favorite influencer is saying, but it is about understanding what's happening in your body. And when it's harder for your body to actually process because there's so much information and so much noise and so much radiation coming in at us, it's hard to truly process what's what.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Know, and I'm sure as in the space you live, you think about oxidative stress, right? Oxidative stress is an imbalance of free radicals with antioxidants, and the end result is oxygen derivation. That's not even the tip of the iceberg of what's happening. In fact, some recent study, some scientific evidence that's being generated by research from Dr. Navio, he's out in California. He talks about cell danger response. And he actually identifies electromagnetic radiation as a stressor to cell danger response. And so if you look at his study work, he talks about the cell itself says, nope, I'm not talking to anybody anymore. I'm in trying to protect myself mode right now. And so I'm going to not function like I should be. And then, by the way, if you don't take that stressor away from me, I'm not going to recover from that state. And so all of a sudden, your body is being exposed to stressors worse and worse over time. And it's becoming harder and harder to recover. I talk about resilience all the time. Some of the things. So when you have electrohypersensitivity, it's highly likely you have elevated DevC in your stomach. Bacterium that is dangerous at high levels, and it's consistently found in at least some clinics that we work with that there is correlation to the definition of electrohypersensitive to elevated DefC. So, in other words, when you have there's more bugs in the stomach than there are cells in the body. And so when you have an RF signal, which we know interferes with the biome of the stomach, that there is impact to immune system function, all sorts of different things that you need to be aware. Mitochondrial development and recovery during the day. If your stomach's being screwed up because you have a cell phone sitting near your stomach every day, there is some scientific evidence that shows that there may be interference with that microbiome.
Wow. There's there's so much. And I want to I want to make sure that we give people some hope, because there is some hope here. Right?
Wait a minute. Josh, you and
Please.
me, we're not going to go to the moon to run away from the emission. It doesn't make sense. Well, maybe we will.
maybe we will.
Maybe we will. So, I mean, it's all about managing your environment. In fact, the way I think about it is you're the architect of your environment. No one else is. The government's not going to tell you what to do necessarily and be accurate, because their standards are 30 years old. So you can't rely on others to sort of framework where you want to live in your life and the style that you want to live. And so that's why precautionary measures and everything we do makes sense, including trying to understand if electromagnetic radiation is interfering with your life.
Absolutely. Now, this is why I wanted to sort of use this as a segue into this next bit, because I wanted to make sure people understand that there's a load of products. And I know part of your story is that, it started with the shielding of the laptop and with the heat and the radiation, and then it developed into so much more here. But just for the person that is only listening, what I have here on the screen is I'm at DefenderShield.com, which is the website you can find out most everything we're talking about today. And you've got the EMF radiation-free earbuds, you've got the laptop shields, you've got the headphones that I'm wearing right now, which are the over-the-ear version. You've got I'm also holding up, I don't know if people can see this because it's on the small screen right now, but let me actually take that off. I have I'm showing the usual version that I'm using when I'm not doing a podcast. So this is also air tubes, and it's got what did you call this part here that keeps it away from the body, or the
acoustical coupling?
The acoustical coupling.
Yeah, between the speaker, that's a speaker on the bottom, and then you have
speakers here.
Yeah, on the bottom.
Yeah,
above that, slightly above that. Those two pieces. Yeah, those are the speakers, and we convert the energy into audio. And that's where it occurs.
That's where it occurs. So this should bring up a question for the person that just, saw us go over that or heard me talk about that and have you explain it. So this is the difference between DefenderShield air tubes versus your regular wired headphones.
Yeah, that is
because of what you mentioned earlier, right? There is EMF, so there's some sort of signal that is still going through the wire. So this just stops it just below the most important bits.
Right, exactly. That's where you want to stop it. You don't want exposure. And as I said, the 2.4 gigahertz can mutate, and a mutated cell can can actually put you 3 times more likely for a cancer in some studies that were done by Yale. But again, this is not about a conversation about you should be worried, because I don't believe that's true. In fact, Josh, you don't have to buy anything from me, and you're safe if you're taking away the stressors that are around you in your personal environment.
Well
That's
said.
sort of the message.
Well said. I think that's beautifully put. What do you think is so? I see. I mean, I just showed one page, right, of your products. What tends to be the biggest sort of? What are your best sellers, or what are the things that people are coming to you the most about? Because I will say this: I have not only do I have the headphones as you see, and the ones that I showed, but I also have the eye masks and I also have the blanket. So, but I'm showing here on the screen again. Here's a EMF radiation protection scarf wrap scarf. They've got beanies. Um, you also have blue light blocking lenses. I'm currently wearing some as well. Here's the mask, the sleep mask that I was talking about. Which these are awesome. My client is the one that put me onto this, and I was like, ooh, I didn't realize they even had that.
Hey, Josh, the ear. I got to talk about the eyes.
Please.
We created the mask because that's a path to the brain like no other. So when you have a RF signal, even the ambient in the room coming from a router next door to you, it at night can pass through to your brain. And we have at least one clinic, a sleep expert, that they quiet the brain. You can literally see with the HRV that the brain is calming down as a result of that. That it's really a shielding inside the mask. But you asked me what's the most
Popular or what the
popular.
war
It's the
yeah,
earbuds. Believe it or not, people really love
really?
the earbuds. But
Wow,
but we also have a very large sell with the cell phones. I'll tell you the story about the cell phones. We had
please.
developed a defender, a, a tablet, something to protect the groin area of the user. And the reason why is because of the 25%, up to 25% I mentioned to you. And
Mhm.
then about 9 months, a year later, I was reading an article about these parents who bought a cell phone for their daughter, a healthy woman, and uh, they want the cell phone she began using, and about a year and a half later, she passed away with from frontal lobe cancer. Uh,
Oh,
Extremely aggressive, and that really upset me because I knew that the technologies that we had developed would prevent anything from passing through, and that all I needed to do is find a way of putting this into a cell phone and put a barrier between the cell phone itself and the user, and that won't happen. It was really almost a personal reason why I did it, because it for some can be serious. Now, I'm not saying that's why she passed away, but there's that potential, particularly when you're heavy users. And so we have a lot of interest in that. And the blankets too. Believe it or not, athletes are using our blanket when they travel on a plane.
yeah,
Why? Because there's
yeah,
RF all over the place.
of
You have
course.
a lot of emissions around you, in and outside the cabin. So they're using that, and they're using the mask. So just an
I
interesting thought.
I think the blankets are very clutch because especially for someone like me that travels a lot, like I'm always on planes, I'm always being exposed to and it's not even just the planes, but like what happens like while you're on the plane, what happens when you get like to the next destination. You know, you're going into a hotel usually, and you don't know what their situation is. So it's like it's almost nice to just have this as your security blanket. and I love that you guys are really good with having the bamboo cotton blend, which is also very important for me. You know, like I want to make sure that whatever I put against my body not only is healthful from the electromagnetic frequency and field perspective, but also from like a eco-friendly, sustainable, healthy perspective for the skin, right? So yeah, this is really really nice. Like I have this, and I have the sleep mask, and I have the different types of the headphones.
Hey, just because you are interested in grounding, you'll recognize what I'm about to say. That's a
Hmm.
floating ground. It's
Aha.
more than just a barrier. It becomes a floating ground. Why is that important? It's
Ooh.
taking what's coming around you and bringing the energy someplace else. If that was grounded, if I was sitting on top of it and I had it plugged into the wall and was grounding it, I would be through the conduit path short to ground. You don't want that pathway when you're using these grounding pads and stuff like that. uh, Be careful not to excessively use those grounding pads because the body's a capacitor in general. And when you absorb that energy, you want to discharge it. And that's what you're doing when you're grounding. You're discharging that energy. And
Oh, so
so,
this is a really quick. Let me just butt in here for a second. And I'm glad that you talked about that, because this is one of the things that makes it interesting and difficult for people in the world of grounding to understand the differences that are out there, similar to an air tube versus a regular wired
right.
headphone set. So the grounding devices that I have block EMF, or the dirty signal from the cords themselves. So it's Dr. What is her name? I cannot remember the name of her business right now, but she's one of the only ones out there that do care about that dirty signal, when it comes
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
like, because if you're getting a dirty signal that goes into the cords, which we're talking about with the headphones, going into you, then yes, you're potentially getting some dirty signals. And this is why some people who are super sensitive may not do as well with grounding.
Exactly. You got to be
Yeah.
careful about it because I'll give you an analogy. And when you have a path to ground from a grounding pad and you're
Hmm.
plugged into the ground, you're in that pathway short to ground. That's just like going next to a tree and electricity from the lightning storm comes down and hits the tree. It is attracting that to the tree, and you're in that tree. You're becoming part of the path to ground. You don't want that. You want to be at the floating ground. There's another thing I want to say because you use HRV, you'll understand this.
Hmm.
Dr. Porter, they're associate of ours. He does brain tap. He was one of the early. You got
Of course.
it.
Of course.
Holy mackerel! Well, we were talking one day, and he travels just like you. He goes everywhere, and he was we were chatting about deterioration of the human body, and then we have a jacket which is a floating ground. Literally, it's a floating. So I gave him a jacket, and I said, every time you travel, I want you to take that jacket and put it on. Don't travel in an aircraft without it.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure he believed me, but what he did is he was going to India, and he did an HRV in the US. Then he did another HRV when he got there, and there was little change in his human body performance. So he actually found that historically there would be a change. And when he was in some barrier of some sort of protection, it did help his body maintain the standard health level it needed to be at. So it
Very
really,
interesting.
in his case, and he understands the brain part about it. and he found that both his brain and his human body was normalized in a trip that normally would unnormalize the human body.
Very interesting. I'm gonna, especially since we're talking about this, and because I do a lot of work in the grounding field, grounding and earthing field. I'm gonna do some tests to see, and it'll be very anecdotal, and it'll be sort of an N of one, in which I'm gonna maybe go a week or maybe even a month without any of the grounding products, and then I want to spend some time trying the different ones, right?
Yeah.
Because like I want to
See if you can see it, feel it.
see if I can
Yeah.
feel a difference between
And because you
the
use the HRV, you'll actually have evidence, which is test evidence of changes that actually quantifies the impact.
absolutely. Yeah, and this is why I like doing what I do, because like it makes it really really interesting to me. Like I'm such a curious person, probably to a fault. But I really am interested in that piece, because it's like the way that I think about it is, if we could be grounded better, right? However we do that, like literally going outside, of course it's on a spectrum. Some people will say, well, you don't want to go grounding with your bare feet out in the middle of a city that has all of this dirty electricity running through it. Okay, sure, right? However, it's like, at what point do we recognize and realize that if we can feel something and actually do that, then that's what matters most. And I think that's what you're saying too. It's like, go out, see if there's some things you can change in your lifestyle, and then run with it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. One thing I haven't overtly said was there's a couple of metrics you use. Time and distance as being primary.
Hmm.
When you use something that's very, very close to you and you only use it for a really short duration of time, you'll live forever. It's when you take that time window and you extend it longer and longer and longer, that allows your body to respond maybe worse and worse and worse in time as a result of that time domain. The other is
Hmm.
distance. If you have a cell phone to your head, that's the maximum that you'd likely be concerned about. If you take it 1 to 2 foot away, 80% of that 1.6 watts per kilogram power level drops. By 4%, it's in the 90s, simply by taking devices and moving away from you just by 4 foot or more. You get pretty safe. So that conservative adjustment of a cell phone, well, I'm not using it anymore, let me put it over here away from me a little bit, is like fixing a lot of the potential problems you may have as a result of exposures.
This is so fascinating. I love all this stuff. Um, let's Before we wrap, let's talk about, like, is there anything else that you have on the horizon? Because again, I want to direct people to the website and make sure that they get all the information they want and need. You have books, you've got stuff for kids, you've got all kinds of things. It's a very in-depth website, and I definitely want to mention that I will list in the show note the fact that you guys have been generous enough to give a discount for our community. But where can people, well, first of all, not even before we go there, is there anything else that we should touch on that you feel like can't wait until we see each other again?
Yeah. One of the things that no one knows what we do is in developing the shielding itself. One of the things that, because of my technical background, one of the things I began realizing is the technologies that we incorporate in our devices is not off the shelf. Now, we started with off the shelf, but it took multiple layers of materials to do it. But we're now generating materials that the average laboratories can't test. We actually go to military laboratories. We have a special arrangement where they're testing very, very higher levels up into the 5 and 6G levels, which we haven't talked about. But that's up to the terahertz space. So it's
Mm.
really very broad. And for us to be able to provide the protection, we spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we have the best in class that you can possibly have. And we know that technologies that existed 5 years ago did not shield the higher levels that we see today. And so one of the things that we've really done and continue to do is test technologies, which we're introducing into our products as we speak. And we go up to 120 gigahertz. And the only reason we don't go higher is because we can't test it. But I believe it's
Wow.
actually tested higher. We're really working to make sure that as the industry changes and evolves, we actually provide the protection for the devices that we're using.
That's impressive. Well done.
Well,
I
thank
mean,
you.
like, what else are you guys working on? Do you have anything else that you're able to talk about right now, or is it kind
Yeah.
of business as
Well,
usual?
we have um, we've been able to create um, rigid shielding up to 120 gigahertz. Um, as I mentioned, we actually have flexible material under development, which was a more difficult scientific problem, which we're developing um, for other applications of products that others may be able to use in the future that they can't today because it's not flexible. So I'm excited about that personally because we claim to be the best in the marketplace because of the educational side of what we do as well as the technology side of what we do. But if we don't do that, we're not meeting up to our own standards, and that's why we keep on pushing the shielding technologies as we do.
Yeah, you guys are definitely doing something right. And once I got bought into the level at which you've made the audio to where it is, I'm like, okay, I'm sold. Literally, that's why I've got all these different products, and I plan on getting more. And that leads me to the person that is also still with us at this point. If you feel like you want to get involved and be a part of this growth, like, reach out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you guys can go directly to it. I believe my link will automatically put the discount code there. But if not, then I will also list the discount code. And where can people keep in touch with everything going on in your
So
world?
we're on Amazon like almost everyone else is forced to do. And then, of course, we have defendershield.com, which is our own site. On that site, by the way, we have products and services, but uh, we also have an educational section in which if you're wanting to find out sort of what is some recent research and what are the linkages to different conditions that may exist, we provide that education in our learning section. And so when we're not just providing products, we're trying to also provide current information about what science is saying. And of course, we keep logs current about, oh, you'll love this. I'm breaking everything right now. There was cell towers in Germany, and they found chromosomal changes from people living close to the towers. Chromosomal. That's
Mm,
basic stuff. And it was distance related. The closer you were, the more it was seen. So they're constantly current information that we're learning about, one of which is this German study. And we continue to uncover issues that may be important for us to understand. And that's why we have the blogs and we try to keep up to date about that.
yes, awesome. That is very, 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 very profound. Again, thank you for your time. And you guys are also on social media, right?
Yeah,
You
we
have,
are.
I think it's
Yep.
Defender Shield.
Yep.
It's pretty easy. Of course, I'll list everything in the show notes. But Dan, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for what you're building, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you. And I can't wait till we chat again because I'm sure we will.
We haven't even touched on 5G. Yes. Thanks so much for inviting me. I enjoyed my time with you. I really did have fun going a little bit off target every so often, but I
Yeah.
enjoyed our conversation.
Well, we'll do it again. And for the people that are watching and listening, thanks for your time. Thank you for hanging in there. And feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear your feedback. Until next time, peace.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen. Better come give us a minute or two. Open the box up, we giving you tools. Giving your engine the fuel that it needs. Breathing into it, it's autoimmune. Make a connection, we're stronger in two. Making us one of a kind of a few. Work on the mind, but show me your moves. If you do what you say, you know what to do. Yeah.
Walk the talk.